In the 1850s, the population in cities like New York grew rapidly, necessitating the construction of more housing. This resulted in open land where animals, such as cows, could be kept, quickly disappearing. Keeping cows outside the city limits and milking them there, unfortunately meant that the milk was mostly sour and unsuitable for human consumption before it could be delivered. Remember that Louis Pasteur published his pasteurization process only in 1865, and it took years before pasteurization was applied in the USA. So, milk producers had to come up with plans to deliver relatively fresh milk to consumers. They found the solution at the bottoms of beer barrels. In the process of brewing beer or distilling spirits, the clean drink is drained off, but the residues, the husks and pits of grains and grapes, are not used. This residue or sediment is also called dregs, swill, or sludge. Presumably, over a few mugs of beer, brewers kindly offered to supply this watery swill to milk producers at low prices. Farmers then rented buildings near the breweries where they kept their cows and fed them the cheap sludge. This saved them the cost of transporting feed from the countryside. It sounds like a win-win situation, but it wasn't. The cows were kept in small spaces where they often could only stand and never lie down. Sometimes the animals had to stand in their own manure because the so-called stables were rarely cleaned. Of course, the places stank. The smell attracted flies, and the animals often had sores on their bodies and suffered from various diseases. The sometimes almost boiling wastewater burned their mouths and rotted their teeth. The delivered milk often had a bluish color that consumers didn't like. To improve the color, gypsum, starch, eggs, and even chalk were added. Molasses was stirred in to enhance the taste. Even flour and burnt sugar were added, and then the mixture was marketed as pure country milk. During that time, as many as 8,000 babies per year died. The doctors of the time were baffled because they couldn't determine the cause of the deaths. The medical knowledge we have built up in the almost 200 years since then was not available to them at the time. However, in 1858, an alert journalist exposed the scandal through a series of articles in his own newspaper, Frank Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper. Frank's articles incited the population. Pressure was put on politicians to hold the guilty breweries and dairies accountable. The politicians' response to this call, however, was to not do the right thing. Their actions are reminiscent of what happens in our government today. Councilman Michael Twomey vigorously defended the distillers and dairies, dismissing any resistance from the outraged public as mere irritations. He also suppressed any serious investigations into the scandal, going so far as to claim that swill milk was healthier for children than regular milk. Leslie continued his campaign to expose the milk scandal and to prove that Councilman Twomey had been bribed to quash any investigations. Leslie's activism eventually led to the release of milk regulations in 1862. Pasteurization also became more widely known, and with its application, milk could be transported by train from the countryside to the cities. In 1906, the United States Congress published the Pure Food and Drug Act, ensuring that, among other things, milk could no longer be mixed with harmful substances. However, it was too late for the thousands of babies and children who had paid the price for others' greed.